We often think of exploration as, something from a bygone era, maybe.
Right.
But there are these remarkable individuals, even now, who embody that same spirit, that drive for discovery.
Absolutely.
And today we're doing a deep dive into the life of one such person, Carlos Rangel, a Mexican explorer, but also a biologist, a writer, a mountaineer, just multifaceted.
Right.
And the material we've got here is this fascinating compilation by López-Corona, mostly drawn from Rangel's own website.
Yeah.
It paints a picture of someone who really dedicated his life to exploring Mexico in some pretty extraordinary ways.
Yeah, what jumps out immediately is just the sheer scope of it all. It's not just like climbing mountains, right?
Right.
It's this deep, sustained interaction with Mexico's geography, its history, even its ancient past. It really points to this incredible, almost insatiable curiosity he had.
Exactly. So think of this as your quick way to get up to speed on someone who spent decades, literally decades, venturing into the Mexican wilderness. We're
Right.
talking climbing huge peaks in Baja, traversing deserts in Durango, even sailing the Sea of Cortez in a really basic boat.
Proper adventure.
Real serious adventure.
And the fact that our main sources are from his own website, well, that gives us a pretty unique personal angle, doesn't it, on his motivations, the experiences that, shaped him. So we'll be digging into his biography, his big mountaineering and exploration achievements, some really standout stuff there. Also his scientific contributions, which maybe aren't as well known but are super important,
Right.
plus his long involvement with the UNAM Mountaineering Association. And then some really gripping bits from his own expedition journals.
Okay, so our goal here is pretty simple. Pull out the most compelling stories, the key insights from Carlos Rangel's amazing life and work. We want to give you a clear picture of his impact on exploration, on mountaineering in Mexico, but without, drowning you in every single detail.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, let's get into it then. Where did this incredible journey even start for him?
Well, Carlos Rangel, he was born in Mexico City, January 21st, 1956, and sadly passed away May 29, 2014. And interestingly, it seems this urge to explore kicked in really early.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, formally, he started at 15, joined the hiking group at the UNAM Preparatory School, led by Professor Grimaldo, but apparently he felt the need to explore pretty much as soon as he could walk.
Just born with it. And that UNAM connection, the National Autonomous University of Mexico, that sounds like it was fundamental, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely pivotal. In 1971, he actually co-founded the UNAM Mountaineering and Exploration Association.
Oh, yeah.
And this became like a core part of his life for the next 35 years.
35 years.
Yeah, deeply involved, expedition member, instructor, head trainer for 6 years. He was even president of the whole association for, over a decade, 95 to 2006. His dedication was just immense.
Wow. That's way more than just a hobby then.
Clearly. It was obviously central to his identity, his life's work. And, his commitment didn't stop there. Even after that long stint at the UNAM Association, in 2007, he and some other UNAM instructors set up a new organization, Montañismo y Exploración.
Oh, right.
So that drive to explore and to share it, it was just relentless. It's also interesting, despite climbing all over Mexico, his favorite mountain was apparently La Encantada Picacho del Diablo way out in Baja California. And his very first climb, Popocatépetl, back in 1971.
Popo is your first mountain. Talk about setting the bar high from day one.
No kidding.
Okay, so we know where he started, but the list of his achievements, mountaineering, exploring, it's staggering. Where do we even begin to get a sense of it all?
Well, one thing that really strikes me is his willingness to do these tough solo climbs.
Right.
And these weren't just, casual hikes. He tackled major ascents alone, like Las Insagalables on Iztaccíhuatl back in 75. Then he made this really determined solo attempt on El Escudo in the Sierra de San Pedro Mártir in 79. Got up 260 meters completely on his own.
Wow.
He also soloed Cerro La Providencia that same year, 79, and then faced really brutal conditions on another solo climb in the Sierra de San Pedro Mártir in 82. These solo trips, they weren't just about bagging peaks.
Yeah.
They show this incredible self-reliance and maybe this deep connection with solitude. That seems to be a theme.
Yeah, that kind of self-reliance in those places.
Yeah.
That takes serious mental and physical grit. Just you and the mountain.
Exactly. But it wasn't all solo stuff. In 1979, he was part of the first Mexican team to climb the Salathé wall on El Capitan in Yosemite.
Ah, the Salathé. That's legendary.
Huge deal. For anyone who doesn't know climbing, the Salathé wall is this iconic, incredibly hard, multi-day rock climb. A massive test.
Hmm.
And in the same year, 1979, he also led the first Mexican ascent of the Gran Trono Blanco in Baja California.
Salathé and Gran Trono Blanco in 1 year. First Mexican ascents.
Yeah. Tells you something about his skill level, right? And his drive. He just kept pushing. Opened a new route on El Abanico on Popocatépetl in 1980.
Okay.
That was a big one. Too tricky mix of rock and ice climbing. Then later, 1987, he does this incredible solo expedition called 200 Leagues through the Barrancas of Durango.
200 leagues solo through the canyons of Durango. That's not your average trek.
Definitely not. And then, check this out, the Caminata de las Californias in 1989. He walked roughly 2,300 kilometers.
Another 300.
Yeah, the entire length of the Baja California peninsula, ending up in San Diego. And what's really cool is he deliberately followed the primeras entradas, the early routes of the Jesuit explorers.
Ah, so it wasn't just about breaking new ground, but also about retracing history, understanding those old paths.
Exactly. That interest in history and the land, it carried on. His exploration of Barranca Batiz and Durango between 89 and 90 actually led to finding important archaeological sites. And then, get this, 1994, he crosses the Sea of Cortez in a primitive sailboat. No modern navigation instruments, just basic principles.
You're kidding. No instruments.
Oh, just pure seamanship and resourcefulness. Talk about adventurous spirit.
From huge mountains to deserts to the open sea.
Yeah.
He really covered the whole spectrum of Mexico's landscapes.
And the list keeps going. 1996, first ascent of the massive wall of Sótano del Barro. That's a super deep pit cave in Querétaro.
Right.
He did an expedition following the Ruta de Hernán Cortés in 97. Again, that history connection. Did explorations in the rainforests of El Petén and Alta Verapaz in Guatemala in 92 and 99. And then a huge one, maybe the peak of his big wall climbing. 1999, the first absolute world ascent of El Escudo in the Sierra de Mártir. That's an 1,100-meter vertical rock face. Just immense.
1,100 meters. And did you say he'd attempted El Escudo before, solo? That first absolute ascent must have felt incredible.
Oh, undoubtedly. A true landmark achievement for him. And finally, between 2000 and 2006, he started this massive project called Mars de Mexia. The idea was to navigate Mexico's coastlines.
The whole coast?
Yeah, ambitious. It didn't get fully completed, but part of it involved a 500-kilometer solo kayak trip from Tampico down to Veracruz.
Solo kayak, 500K?
Yeah. Again, just showing that relentless drive, exploring new kinds of environments. He wasn't just a mountaineer or just a desert trekker or just a sailor. He moved between them all. Super adaptable, super curious.
It's just incredible, the sheer variety of what he tackled. And you mentioned beyond the pure adventure, he also made some really interesting scientific contributions.
Yes. And this side of his work, maybe it gets overlooked sometimes, but it's really significant. Back in 1986, he found these ancient wooden masks in the valley of Tehuacan in Puebla.
Wooden masks.
Yeah, it turns out they were about 1,000 years old. A major archaeological find. Got quite a bit of attention TV program, a UNAM book about it.
1,000 years old.
Wow. And like we said earlier, his explorations in Barranca Batiz, Durango in 89 also turned up previously unknown archaeological sites.
So his exploring wasn't just about personal challenge or, conquering nature. It was actively adding to our knowledge of Mexico's past.
Precisely. Take the Caminata de las Californias in 89. More than just an epic walk, right? The stuff he collected meticulously over those 6 months. That directly led to setting up the Historical Museum of Ensenada.
No way. So a museum came out of his walk.
Yeah, a tangible contribution to preserving history. He also jumped in on the International Scientific Expedition to Popocatépetl during the big solar eclipse in 1991, lent his expertise.
Okay.
And as we mentioned, that Sótano del Barro climb, that got documented by the Discovery Channel in 96, bringing that whole unique exploration to a much wider audience.
It's fascinating how it all weaves together, the exploration, the science, the history. And you talked about his deep roots with the UNAM Mountaineering and Exploration Association. What was his role in really building that group up?
Well, as a co-founder back in 71, his influence was fundamental, really. Under his guidance and through the whole association's efforts, they did some really important early trips abroad.
Like where?
Ecuador in 75, the Canadian Rockies in 77. For Mexican University mountaineering back then, these were huge deals. Built up experience, confidence.
Yeah, it sounds like they were really pushing the envelope for what Mexican climbers thought was possible at the time.
They absolutely were. And, initially they faced a bit of skepticism from the university authorities.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but through their successes, their dedication, they eventually got official recognition, support. They were key in establishing mountaineering, rock climbing, even speleology caving as respected activities within UNAM. They were actively challenging myths, pushing limits. And that Salathé wall climb in 79 we talked about, that was a massive statement, really broke down some barriers.
That Salathé climb keeps coming up. It really feels like a pivotal moment.
Yeah, definitely marked a turning point. The UNAM Association even went on to organize the first Mexican expedition to the Himalayas, Kanchenjunga Stay, in 1980.
The Himalayas, wow.
Yeah, an immense undertaking. Logistically, technically, just huge. And to spread the word, share the passion, they also started the Montañismo y Exploración magazine, became a really important voice for exploration in Mexico.
So Rangel and that UNAM group, they were really instrumental in building that whole culture of exploration and serious mountaineering in the country.
No doubt about it.
Okay, so we've covered a ton, his early life, these incredible achievements across all sorts of terrain, the scientific side, his foundational work with UNAM, but the source material also has excerpts from his own chronicles, right?
Yeah.
Which must give a much more personal feel.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's dig into those. What stands out from his Caminata de las Californias chronicle, that epic Baja walk?
Yeah, the chronicle really puts you there, in that rugged, often beautiful Baja landscape. He talks in detail about trying to follow those old Jesuit routes, which adds this rich historical texture to the physical slog, And you really feel the harshness of it, the terrain, the climate. Like, he vividly describes the sudden, intense downpour after a long drought. He mentions it had been 5 years since that area had seen real rain.
5 years. And then a deluge. Wow. Must have been quite something.
Yeah. And he also describes rediscovering these old lost trails, like one called Testrazo de las Ánimas, basically an old bighorn sheep path barely visible after years.
Cool.
Those moments of connecting with the past right there on the land, they're really powerful. And the interactions with local people, they're fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
He told stories about the llaneros, the local ranchers at Llanos de Caquiwi, welcoming him super generously, fishermen at Los Burros, the folks in San Borja. These encounters really bring the human side of his exploring to life.
So it wasn't just him against the wilderness, it was connecting with the people living in those remote spots, too.
Exactly. And he paints this amazing picture of the Desierto Central, calls it La Última Frontera, the last frontier. You really get that sense of deep solitude, being truly out there.
Yeah.
There's this beautiful bit about a close encounter with a bighorn sheep, just this moment of quiet connection with nature that clearly stuck with him.
Yeah.
And of course, reaching milestones, finally getting to San Diego after months on foot. The huge welcome he got in Ensenada. He even talks about finding the original border marker, the Mochonera de Palu. Adds another historical layer.
You can almost feel the weight of that journey through his writing.
Yeah.
What about the El Capitan Chronicle? The Salathé climb. Totally different world, right?
Oh, completely different beast. His account really gets across the almost mythical status Salathé had for Mexican climbers then. There was this idea, almost a belief, that it wasn't for Mexicans after earlier attempts hadn't worked out. Yep. He also makes a point about the clean climbing ethic they used, relying on removable gear, not hammering in permanent stuff. And the Chronicle just details the challenges, the close calls over those 6 days on the wall. Really puts you up there with them, high on that granite face.
6 days on that wall, the mental pressure must have been as intense as the physical effort.
Absolutely. He talks a lot about teamwork, the sheer perseverance needed, reaching key spots like Long Ledge, how much that meant. He doesn't sugarcoat the toll it took physically and mentally, the exhaustion, the focus needed, the risks. And then finally reaching the summit, you feel that sense of massive effort and ultimately accomplishment.
I can just imagine the relief, the feeling of victory after all that. He also wrote about his climbs on Popo and Ista, the big volcanoes. What comes through there?
Well, his story of the solo climb on Los Inescalables on Ista, it really focuses on the problem-solving side of being alone up high. The mental strength needed to just keep going when things get tough.
Right.
And he talks about the mixed climb on El Abanico, on Popo Rock and Ice, including this really close call, a near fall, reminds you of the dangers,
Yeah, definitely.
It's also interesting he mentions using newer gear for the time, like nuts and stoppers for protection on El Abanico. Shows how techniques were evolving. But the big theme running through all his mountain writing, it's this deep, almost spiritual connection he felt with the mountains themselves.
Yeah, it sounds like for him, climbing was more than a sport. It was like a conversation with the landscape.
Exactly. And then finally, that Mers de Mexico project.
Mm.
What do the chronicles tell us about that kind of adventure?
Well, he really describes the feeling of sailing the Sea of Cortez in that basic boat. The challenge of the open water, relying just on fundamental skills and minimal gear, really highlights his adaptability, embracing the uncertainty, the raw elements, and his accounts of kayaking the Caribbean and Gulf coasts, they convey this strong sense of isolation. Even though he knew people were tracking him remotely, there's this unique mental space you get into on long solo trips like that.
Right.
He also talks about the strong bonds formed with his fellow explorers on different parts of that project, Carlos Aragon, Alex Niz, emphasizes that human connection, even when you're doing these really demanding, often lonely things.
What's so fascinating is the contrast, isn't it? Between the vertical world of climbing he mastered and the horizontal vastness of the sea. Yet he seemed equally drawn to both, ready to tackle whatever each environment demanded.
It really shows this boundless, multifaceted spirit of exploration. So, looking back at everything we've covered today, his life, his achievements, what would you say is Carlos Rangel's lasting legacy?
Well, his legacy it's pretty extensive. He left behind a lot of written work, over 300 articles, 4 books, that discovery documentary participation. So his experiences, his insights, they continue to inspire people.
Right.
Maybe even more importantly, he was crucial in shaping generations of Mexican mountaineers and explorers through all that time at UNAM. His contributions were recognized internationally, too. He was a respected figure globally. But ultimately, I think he's remembered as a real pioneer, someone who didn't just do amazing things physically, but who also thought deeply, had this incredible curiosity, and turned those ideas into action. His death in 2014, it was a huge loss for Mexican exploration.
He really sounds like someone who lived a life packed with purpose, passion, and just a deep connection to the world. For you, what's one surprising or insightful detail that really stayed with you from this deep dive?
For me, it's that bit from the Caminata de las Californias chronicle, where he talks about how the local people he met along the way, they knew he was coming, they were sort of tracking his progress, and they'd offer these unexpected kindnesses, hospitality.
Yeah.
The idea that his long solo walk somehow became this shared thing with these remote communities, that they were looking out for him, I find that quite touching. Speaks volumes about human connection, doesn't it? Beyond just the exploration itself.
That is a wonderful detail. Really highlights the human element woven through it all. So for you, listening, think about this. Carlos Rangel spent his life relentlessly exploring, trying to deeply understand the world. How could his dedication maybe spark your own pursuit of knowledge, of deeper understanding in whatever field really grabs your interest?
And maybe think about this too. This dive into Rangel's life brings up a question. What undiscovered territories, maybe geographical, maybe intellectual, maybe creative, are waiting for your own deep dive? Reflect on how Rangel tackled challenges, his willingness to just step into the unknown, and consider how his spirit might inform your own explorations, whatever they might be.